I hired a pet detective for my missing cat. Turns out he's not what I expected. About 2 months ago, my indoor cat, Mittens, slipped out through an open window. I spent days searching, posting on neighborhood boards, putting up flyers, and even leaving out food and her favorite blanket near the house. Nothing. Mittens was gone. A few weeks later, I heard about Derek the pet detective through a local Facebook group. Supposedly, he had helped reunite dozens of pet owners with their lost animals. Feeling desperate, I thought, why not? Derek showed up at my house the next day with 2 things, a beat-up notebook and a small entourage. His team included a very bored-looking intern named Alex and a Pomeranian named Stella, who he said was trained to sniff out lost cats. Derek's clothes looked like they'd been pulled out of a yard sale bin, and he wore aviator sunglasses that he refused to take off, even indoors. He immediately struck me as a little eccentric, but hey, desperate times. He had this whole routine where he sat cross-legged on my living room floor, lit a candle, and started channeling the energy of Mittens. I was 100% skeptical, but also thought, well, maybe there's some method to his madness. He insisted on absolute silence as he muttered, "Show yourself," Mittens over and over in a low voice. Then, in the middle of his chanting, his phone rang. He jumped up and answered it like he'd forgotten he was even doing a ritual. I could hear him arguing with someone about how he didn't owe them any money. When he hung up, he looked back at me and said, "All right, I'm getting a strong feeling about the backyard." We went out back, and he spent a solid 15 minutes watching Stella sniff around the bushes. Every so often, he'd say something like, "Yep, she's getting closer," or "Mittens is definitely near." Eventually, Stella laid down under the tree and just refused to move, clearly bored. Derek squinted, muttered, "Interesting, interesting," and scribbled something in his notebook. Then, things got weirder. Derek suddenly pointed toward the far end of my yard and yelled, "There, I see her." I looked, but all I saw was a clump of weeds. Derek sprinted over, leapt into the bushes, and emerged holding an old garden gnome. He looked at it and muttered, "A decoy. She's toying with us." At that point, I was considering cutting my losses, but he insisted we press on. He and Alex ended up camping out in my backyard overnight just in case Mittens returned to the scene. By morning, they were gone, leaving behind an empty pizza box, a mess of muddy footprints, and a bill for $150. Here's the kicker. About a week later, I heard a faint meow outside my front door. There was Mittens, totally fine, probably just having gone on her own little adventure. I texted Derek to let him know my cat was back, and he responded with, "You're welcome." So yeah, I paid a stranger $150 to try to commune with my cat and run around my backyard with a gnome.